Good evening, welcome to Talk Maldives. I'm Amna Tushama. Tonight's show will be focusing on democracy, legal reform, human rights, governance, and also gender development. And to further discuss about this, I will invite to the show Attorney General and Minister in charge of Ministry of Law and Gender, Mohamed Nasheed. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
To begin with, I would like to go to the recent hot topic of the attempts to overthrow the president. So legally speaking, what are the consequences of attempting to overthrow the president?
At the onset, it's unclear, or at least to the general public, of the extent of what has happened. What has happened is that there was an attempt to, as you have mentioned, to overthrow the government and a conspiracy to that effect. And in doing so, but it is laughable that the attempt was done in such manners that even a kid would laugh at what has happened. From the statement issued by the police, it is clear that some people, a former prosecutor general and one of the magistrates in an island court, they have attempted to make a fake arrest warrant, which was supposedly to be issued on the request of the police, and police is very certain that it was not requested by the police. So there is a falsification conspiracy to that, and fabrication offences as well related to those. Then again, the alleged crimes are that this was placed in a road of Malé, and it was supposedly to be picked up by a police and the president to be arrested based on that. And it's unfortunate that even the former President Nasheed, also was part of this. He allegedly, and not even allegedly, but his office has confirmed that he has talked about this with some of the generals in MNDF to seek what actions that the MNDF would take based upon these so-called false arrest warrant of the president. And further to that, there was some attempts, and people were ready to actually gather near the president's residency. So basically, this was a very feeble attempt to throw the government, and attempt on the person of the president again. So I would say the legal consequences would be much more clearer once the investigation is finalized, and I believe the investigation is ongoing now.
So what about the security forces? Do you think they will support such an attempt? Is it weak or strong?
The strange thing here is that those who are supposed to know the laws of the country, those who have been in the president of the country, those who have had state independent institutions, those who are in such positions, they do not even know the basics of the law. The MNDF do not have a civil right to go and arrest a person. They are not a part of the civilian force who would carry out a court order to arrest somebody. This is, I think, the fundamental of this. The police would only carry out lawful orders.
So since you're also from the background of international human rights law, how do you see the development of democracy, human rights and governance in the Maldives after the enactment of the new constitution in 2008?
I believe
what are the main challenges? Yes.
I believe that we as a country have gone through a very interesting as well as progress in a very fast manner on these areas, governance, be it governance, human rights, or even rule of law. For example, if we look back into the constitutions that we had before, prior to 2008, it was a very centralized constitutions that we had, the past constitutions, whereby the president had a very powerful position. He would be the head of the judiciary, he would be the head of the executive, he had the mandate to have members in the parliament. Additionally, he appointed and dismissed judges as well as independent institutions and institutions such as the monitoring bodies. But with the advent of the new constitution, we have focused that there would be a very comprehensive, a very with a complete set of separation of powers between the judiciary, the legislature, as well as the executive. And we have, even if we look into the whole international arena, a very comprehensive Bill of Rights compared to even the other countries. Similarly, we have introduced and established a lot of independent institutions, such as, for the very first time, such as the Independent Auditor General's Office, Independent Anti-Corruption Commission, Independent Prosecutor General's Office, Independent Election Commission as well. Additionally, I think it's fundamental to note that for the very first time we introduced a Supreme Court with the new Constitution. Additionally, I believe that with these, there were so many governance aspects that were also introduced for the very first time with the new Constitution. So the development has been enormous. But at the same time, what we have seen is that, yes, after the Constitution came in August 2008, we rushed in to have a presidential election in October 2008, and I believe several legislations necessary for that purpose were enacted at a short period of time. And we were able to get, for example, the Supreme Court established, judges appointed, the Prosecutor General's Office established, as well as appointed Election Commission, plus other various bodies to have a free and fair election. And it is widely accepted that we had free and fair elections in 2008 and 2009, as well as in 2013 and 2014 for presidential and parliamentary elections respectively. So with that, we have moved forward. We have brought in legislations. We have done work to introduce these principles of human rights and good governance into our country, into the structure of our country. But what we have not done is ensure that the fundamentals that are necessary to give life to this new Constitution were also established during these first few years of the new Constitution. Answering the challenges, yes, we do have a lot of challenges. We have made a lot of progress, but at the same time, there needs to be much done too. For example, one of the main challenges is the capacity in the country, both human resources-wise as well as institutional-wise. Here we are talking about a very few people with trained and expertise knowledge on any of these areas, and we are talking about a lot of these institutions, especially independent institutions as well. The burden.
What about the independent institutions? Do you think it is strong enough, and it is how long will it take for us to reach the best practices of a democracy?
I think in theory we do have the best practices. For example, even the Constitution has established the best practices principles enshrined in the Constitution. The enabling legislation have done the further on that. But what we have lacked and what we are still trying to catch up with is ensure that we build the capacity, the human resources capacity, the capacity for the institutions to grow. As well as what we have, another challenge that we have is that we have to make people aware, train people on these, as well as instill these principles in our day-to-day life practices as well. So there are challenges on those areas as well. And for me, looking from a legal background as well as from judicial background as well, literature, for example, on any of these, jurisprudence on any of this is lacking in the country. We need to produce this, especially in our local language, so that we could understand and we could develop our institutions, our theories, our constitutional jurisprudence as well.
So often we hear the legislature being ridiculed, which may not be true. But then again, what is the main area of focus of the government to strengthen the democracy, the governance, and the legal framework? Yes.
As I was starting with the discussion on that we have had a very free and fair presidential election with the new Constitution back in 2008, and followed by a parliamentary election in 2009. But I think and I believe that the government at that time did not have a focus on developing on the foundation that was laid down by the Constitution. Not much not much was done, and we have lost 5 years because of that. For different reasons. One could argue that there was so much political turmoil at that time, there was so much polarization at that time, but what we have not done was actually ensure that the pillars necessary for the foundation of our democracy, of our constitution, was not put in. Just to give you an example, when we came into the office back in November 2013, and when I looked into our laws as well as our constitutional provisions, fundamental things such as laws that contravened the constitution existed at that time. So we had to focus to ensure that the laws that were in contravention to the constitution were either repealed or amended. So that was one of our focus areas that we developed and worked on. To date, we were able to actually repeal all these laws with the help of the new incoming parliament back in 2014. They have done a marvelous job on that. We were able to send, I believe, 30-odd pieces of legislations. Additionally, we need more new legislations that would give in the procedures that are necessary for the principles laid down in the Constitution, the basic human rights, for example. So we have put in bills to that effect. We have put in bills to energize our economy. We have put in bills to ensure that our social harmony and social protection are there. So far, based on that, we have within the last 2 years submitted and passed 86 pieces of legislations. That's an enormous number of legislations. But then again, this includes a lot of that what had to be completed way back in 2008, 9, 10, which were not done. So here we are trying to catch up with time. Additionally, what we do also acknowledge is that there are several pieces of legislation that are essential for our democracy, our rule of law and governance. For example, if we look into the criminal justice system, we are in need, especially since our new penal code has come in last year, we are in need of a criminal procedure code and with a modern evidentiary law as well. If we look into the civil justice system, we need the same civil procedure code to ensure that the gaps and overlaps that exist now with practice of a new constitution with all rules and interplay between those two, we need to ensure that they are not there and have a more modern system that is in line with best practices. That is what is envisaged in our new constitution.
And in terms of the priorities of the government in rendering services to the public, and for the betterment and development of the people, what is being done now?
I think if we look into what we have done so far, and especially President Yamin's government came in with a mandate, with pledges on ensuring that we have youth development, economic development, as well as security to the people in the country. If we, for example, look into from a human rights perspective, one of our focus areas are economic and social rights. And this is reflected on what's been done as well. If we look into what's been done on the ground for the last 2 years on economy, one would say that it is unprecedented level of work and progress has been achieved. We have had I'm not the expert to talk on economy, but the progress that we have had in the area of economy on ensuring that our budgetary deficits are lowered, our income is increased, our economic activities are increased, the level of construction, for example, construction that is being done in the country has increased, the level of income to the general public, to the ordinary person, has increased, the accessibility to US dollars, for example, has increased. So all this reflects that we have done well in economic wise. Similarly, big international foreign investors are coming into the country. They are investing in Maldives. Maldives is the best country to invest. We have a high yield high yield of return for any investment, especially in tourism and tourism-related industries. And we are seeing more of other industries also coming into the country. We are in discussion with various international brands to be introduced again into the Maldives. So economic-wise, it is unarguable that we have done so well within the last 2 years. One could even compare of what we have achieved now from what we have achieved in the last 15 years. This is especially with the slowdown in the economy in the country's economy back in 2009-10 and 11. This is backed by World Bank, which states that we will have economic growth of 6.7% this year. Going into social, as well as the development of our youth, especially. I think our focus and President Yamin's focus is that the youth are the engine of our economy. The youth are the engine of our development. So much focus is being given towards youth. Thereby, the government's focuses are not only on sports and entertainment for the youth, but also starting from education to the health, as well as their well-being, their employment opportunities. So work on any of these areas are being tackled by the relevant ministries every single day. Opportunities for such as loan schemes, such as educational opportunities, scholarships, fellowships, trainings are being given to the youth. A sports bill came in to ensure that we have a very good area of sports available for our youth. Infrastructures relating to these programs are being produced throughout the country, not just here in Mali, but throughout the country. So an unprecedented level of work is being done. If we look into the other area of development of the country that was promised by President Yamin, it's the security of the people.
Coming to the security and human rights, it is both locally and globally criticized that the government of the Maldives hold political prisoners, especially opposition leaders. So what is the say of the government on this?
If I could just have a minute on the security issues before going into this topic, especially the political topics. If we look into the security aspects, one could just easily identify, in looking into the statistics of the police, of the courts here in Maldives, that the level of crime has decreased enormously within the last 2 years. Serious crimes have decreased. The opportunity to ensure that we have a livable environment is being produced by the state, especially in congested islands like Mali. So things are getting much better on that front as well. There have much work was done by government, by the law enforcement authorities to ensure that this is so for the people. Education, health, you name it. I believe every day things are being done. Infrastructure. When we came into the government, we looked at the hospitals, the schools. It was in dismay. We had to ensure that they were repaired, maintained, better equipments were put in, doctors, teachers were again put in there, so that these places do function, do give the proper services to the country, to the people. So, and based on that, and building up on that, new developments such as the Hulumali Bridge, such as the infrastructures in the other islands like sanitation, water, engines, energy, and road works, harbour works are being done throughout the country. So economic, social activities are being done everywhere in the country to ensure that the people, as promised by President Yamin, have a better life.
So coming back to the political side, some have cited that there are over more than 1,700 political prisoners. So what is it true, and what are the status of those high-profile cases, President Nasheed, Colonel Nazim, Sheikh Imran? Yes.
You started with the question that there has been criticisms on the fact that there are a lot of opposition leaders imprisoned. But I believe the names that you have just mentioned are the names that have been cited as examples. For example, President Nasheed, Sheikh Imran, of Adalat Party, Colonel Nazim, the former defense minister, Tolhat, the former defense minister,
yes.
and former MP Nazim as well.
Yes.
And I believe the former Vice President Adib as well.
Exactly.
But if we identify those people, do they actually belong, or did they actually belong to the opposition? No. President Nasheed, yes, he was the opposition leader. Sheikh Imran at that time, yes, was in opposition to the, and Adalat Party was in opposition to the government. But the rest of them, definitely not. We Maldivians know their status. For example, if we take the example of Colonel Nazim, who was the former defense minister, he was in office as a minister of defense when he was accused of the crime. He was not in the opposition. Similarly, Vice President Adib, he was in office when he was accused of the crime. He was not in the opposition at that time. MP Nazim, he was in the government coalition, government party, PPM at the time when he was convicted for the crime he is convicted. So there is a total mismatch of what's been said in the reality. And it is very evident again on the fact that people are throwing numbers like 1,700 being arrested or in prisons for political reasons or for as political prisoners. In fact, that is so untrue that there are no political prisoners in the country. Those who have been convicted or are being tried or charged are done so because they have crossed the lines or they have been alleged of committing crimes, be it a prisoner, be it a politician or otherwise. Looking to the 1,700 numbers, it is totally untrue. What we have seen is that from the reports and statements by the police itself, only I believe 170 people were arrested during or detained during the times of political rallies or demonstrations, and I believe 132 people were actually cases were put forward to Prosecutor General's Office for prosecution, and I think to date only one was charged. So
yes.
1,700 and the reality of 134, we could see that these numbers are being cooked.
So the criticism on political freedom, do you think we have freedom of assembly and freedom of expression as stipulated in the Constitution?
Definitely, and it is indeed as done, practice as done in our enabling legislations to that effect. What we are practicing, what we have seen in this country is that back in 2004-05, we have let go of our freedoms to the other extreme of the pendulum, where we could just say anything to anybody in the name of freedom of expression.
Respecting the other person's rights.
Were not
Yes.
a practice, were not practice at all. So here we are at a stage that we have a new constitution which enshrines that these things must be done as in accordance with our international standards as well as prescribed in Islam. But at the same time, what we have to understand is that while we talk about freedom of expression, freedom of assembly, there is the freedom of life, there is the freedom of having a peaceful life for the others as well, freedom of not being defamed as well. So these are areas where necessary legislation, enabling legislations have to be there, and these must be practiced along those lines as well. So while we are talking about
yes.
Having freedoms such as these as practiced in the first world or the democratized societies in the world, we have to also practice the responsibilities that are being practiced by them as well.
Exactly. So we all talk about our rights all day long, and then we undermine the rights of the other people. So what is being done to actually eliminate slandering, labeling, defaming? Yes.
I think that's one area of law where we have to work again on. With what we have currently is the basic constitutional provisions. What we do have is a very old law or regulation which dates back to 2006 on defamation. Then there's none. So what the Attorney General's office has done and what the government is working on is we have now drafted a bill on freedom of expression with the component of defamation, so that it will compensate of and stop or diminish or discourage people from slandering people, from defaming people and doing unlawful things such as this.
So coming back to the political side, one of the most talked about cases of the Maldives is the case of former President Mohamed Nasheed and his medical leave. So we often hear the dialogue of him being deposed in 2012, coup d'etat, and his conviction for the case abducting the Chief Judge Abdullah Mohammed in January 2012, and that being politically motivated. So what do you say about these allegations?
It's strange that even today the question of there being a coup at the time of 2012 February is being still talked about, because the facts were cross-examined. There was an investigation by CONI, the Commission on National Inquiry, which was actually placed with the help of Commonwealth, with the participant former Justice from Singapore, with observers from Commonwealth as well as United Nations, and they all agreed on the report that was actually the report that was formed by or established by the CONI. And in that it was very clearly stated that President Nasheed actually resigned. And if I could quote, it was said in the report that President Nasheed's resignation was voluntary of his own free will, and that it was not caused by any illegal coercion or intimidation. Further, it goes into saying that the events that led to President Nasheed resigning were in large measure reactions to the actions of President Nasheed himself.
So it was not a coup d'etat?
It is very clear, and there's no question about it. This was accepted by the United Nations, Commonwealth, including President Nasheed. So I find it strange that this is still being talked about. Following that, I think there has been much criticism on this government, saying that President Nasheed's case is politically motivated. But what one must remember or remind oneself is that this case was initiated not when this government was in place, and actually it started way back when President Nasheed was in office. The backdrop of this case is that he had, during his time, done so many unconstitutional and unlawful things, such as padlocking up the Supreme Court, arresting MPs like MP Yamin at that time, MP Qasim, MP Nazim, unlawfully, and the courts had clearly, the courts of the Maldives has said that they were unlawful. He went so far, additional arrests and detention of so many other politicians as well at that time, disregard to the laws of the Maldives. So all these were the backdrop of this case. Additionally, I believe there was even an instance where in February 2012 itself that he was going to actually dismiss the whole of judiciary of the Maldives and replace it with his own council. This is totally unconstitutional. But this, there's so much evidence to this effect as well. The ultimate straw was that he abducted, or he ordered to abduct the Chief Judge of Criminal Court, Mr. Abdullah Mohammed. And this was condemned by the High Court of Maldives, the Supreme Court of Maldives, the United Nations, the Commonwealth, the bilateral countries, all the legal profession in the Maldives. Everybody condemned this, called for immediate release of the Chief Judge. The courts of the Maldives and Chief Judge Abdullah Mohammed was actually denied of habeas corpus when even after the court ordered him to be brought forward before the courts. He was detained without access to lawyers, without the access to his family. All these were unlawful. And these are facts known to us. This was asked by the Prosecutor General, this case was asked by the Prosecutor General when President Nasheed was in office to be investigated by the Human Rights Commission. And it was the Independent Human Rights Commission established by President Nasheed which actually investigated this case. It was prosecuted in July 2012, way back before this government came in. There were several hearings during 2012-13. prior to the presidential election, but President Nasheed got the chance to, since the case was not over, he got the chance to run for the election in 2013. Later on, this case again resumed back in 2015, and he was convicted in 2015, March, I believe. So the case, there's no way that one could even point fingers at the government saying this case was politically motivated, because this case started at the time of President Nasheed, prosecuted at the time of President Wahid, and later on it was finalized. And what's been the backdrop, I believe all Maldivians know the backdrop of this case, the facts of this case, and it is very evident as what has happened. But if there's, as like anybody else, one has unhappy with the judgment of a court, one has to appeal.
And there were some claims that the former president being denied appeal his conviction by the criminal court at the High Court. So what is the status of this appeal case now?
Yes, he initially, when the criminal court convicted him for 13 years of imprisonment in March 2015, he initially said that, President Nasheed initially said that he will not appeal his case in High Court. And he gave so many excuses to that. But later on, I believe he had requested the president 3 times, and he also requested the Prosecutor General as well to appeal the case on his behalf to the High Court. And the Prosecutor General, I believe sometime later last year, actually appealed President Nasheed's case to the High Court on his behalf. The ruling of the High Court stated that President Nasheed has the opportunity to appeal his own case on his behalf. And in fact, President Nasheed, when produced to the High Court on the appeal case, stated so himself. He said, I want to appeal, not the state. But based on the High Court's decision, the High Court decided that the Prosecutor General did not have the mandate to appeal the case on his behalf. Later on, the Prosecutor General has appealed this case to the Supreme Court, and we saw the first hearing of this case earlier this month.
So what's the perspective of the government regarding this case?
The President has been very clear. The President has always asked President Nasheed to exhaust the legal process, the judicial processes. We would welcome him to go through all the legal processes, judicial processes, and see the outcome of the case.
So the UN Working Group on Arbitrary Detention has concluded that the former President Nasheed's case went wrong. What has happened to the decision of the working group?
Yes, the UN special procedure, the working group on arbitrary detention, had ruled that the case was wrong. But as we could very clearly see from United Kingdom currently, the decision of such a working group or the special procedure is a non-binding one. In fact, I remember one of the diplomats from one of the Western's big powers, when he was discussing with me why did you actually engage with the working group? This is the attitude that they had. But we as a government, there's nothing for us to hide. It's the laws, it's the procedures, judicial processes that we have. We went and we answered back the facts of the case. It's a non-binding to the government. What government has ensured that the decision of the working group was submitted or relayed to the relevant authorities of the state. And I believe and I understand that the decision of the working group was actually submitted by the Prosecutor General to the Supreme Court for its consideration during the appeal process.
So the former President Nasheed has now left to UK for the medical surgery. This too based upon the legal opinion of AG. So it was stated that he was granted an initial 30 days period. Would this period be extended? And what if he does not return back to the country? What will happen?
The general rules of a convicted person going abroad for medical purposes are there in the Prisons and Parole Act, and those are related to, those powers are vested with the Director of Prisons as well as the Commissioner of Correctional Services. and they have a body to advise them, a medical body that advises them. And I believe the medical body is advising the relevant authorities had advised that yes, he did have these medical issues and that it requires medical surgery as well. And there was even at some point by his lawyers stating that he might get paralyzed if the medical surgery was not done soon enough. Being a former president, he also had privileges under the former law on former presidents. And looking and considering this as well as on ensuring that he do get the proper medical attention. He was sent to the place of his choosing to the United Kingdom for his medical purposes to ensure that he got the best medical treatment that he could get. So that's where we are. And initially 30 days was given. Yes, he could extend it based on the documents that are required under the relevant laws to be submitted to the relevant authorities, and they would review it and make a decision based on the documents that's are produced. Would he return? I don't know, but I believe and I trust he being a president, he being having given the guarantee in writing that he was going for medical purposes, he would return back.
So his leave can be extended?
It could be extended, yes. And there is nothing new. Even, for example, one of the high-profile convicted person is out of Maldives, abroad, seeking medical treatment as well, and his period was also extended based on the documents that were produced. And he's undergoing, I believe, a second surgery. So, similarly, if President Nasheed submits these relevant documents, the relevant authorities would review it and grant additional period based on those. But I trust President Nasheed having given the guarantees that he will return, would keep his word.
And what about the controversy of his jail sentence being commuted to house arrest?
That's a strange phenomena that I have been hearing. We have been hearing all this while.
What's the legal position on that?
I remember giving this interview in a press conference way back in 24th July last year. I was at the President's office giving this press conference with the then former Vice President, and I remember very accurately that I was saying the same thing as I'm going to say now, that the President actually pardoning and or commuting sentences of convicted person rest only with the President of the Maldives, period. The Constitution, if I could recall, it is Article 115S of the Constitution, gives this power to the President, and this is elaborated more in the Clemency Act. But both these legal instruments states very clearly, without ambiguity, that the President has this power only for those persons who do not have an appeal pending, who have no further appeal. It is very clear, very evident, even by President Nasheed himself, having submitted his case to the Supreme Court in September 2015, that there is still a pending case, an appeal of him going on in the judiciary, in the Supreme Court, by himself, by the Prosecutor General as well. So there's no way that the President have any executive authority to either pardon or commute the sentence. There's no question about it. No other person, no other authority in the country does have this power. The President currently, as of yet, does not have the power to pardon or even commute the sentence of President Nasheed, for the simple fact that his appeal process has not been exhausted.
So since you're also the minister in charge of the Ministry of Law and Gender, coming back to the social arena, women are often underrepresented in all aspects of life. It is not unique to the Maldives, but in terms of gender equality, in which stage are we compared to the regional countries or the rest of the Muslim world?
Maldives, I believe we have especially achieved a lot with regards to gender parity, especially in the field of education, in the field of maternity health, as well as health-wise as well. We have done well, achieved and have achieved progress in the way of in the arena of employment as well. But much work has to be done, especially on ensuring that women are there in senior positions of the state, of the private and public institutions as well. With that backdrop, I remember that when we were actually debating on the constitution, we tried to put in a quota for women in parliament. It did not work, but we tried it. We did try it. Now, currently, what we are trying to do is ensuring that, especially CEDAW, the Convention on Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, the international treaty for that, is domesticized with the reservations as well into our local laws as well. So we have drafted a gender equality bill now, and we have submitted this bill to the Parliament now. So we are making sure that these discriminations are eliminated, plus a more progressive approach is taken into ensuring that there's parity of gender in all fields of work. Especially we would remember that President Yamin himself have initiated to ensure and announce that in the public sector, in the public company SOEs and public companies, that there would be at least 33% of representation in the boards by women.
So if you take global examples, we see the highest number of female MPs in the world is in Rwanda, and they introduced quotas. So what is the view of the government on introducing positive discrimination towards empowering women and the quota system? Yes.
This has, as I mentioned, was attempted back in 2008 for the Constitution. We would be trying it again. But before we do that, we do have to ensure that there's a consensus between the political arena, including all government as well as opposition politicians as well.
What about the bill that was being drafted last year in collaboration with International Federation of Electoral Systems?
That has been drafted, so that before introducing it to the Parliament, we have to ensure that we get the parliamentarians on board on this principle. This is something that we would welcome, but there's, for different reasons, when we tried this back in 2008, there was so much opposition to this. Even when we tried to introduce it to the parliamentary election law back in 2009, there was so much opposition to this. We do have to understand, especially by the Ministry of Law and Gender and the government, that before attempting to do this again, we have to make people aware of the positive nature of ensuring that positive discrimination is an essential part, is something of use, is something that has been proven to be useful in other countries as well. As I said, it's sad that we do have few number of women in senior positions, especially in the heads of the states, for example, the legislation in the parliament, in the cabinet, in the judiciary also.
So if we take Maldives, come into the social aspect, child protection is important. We do not see children unattended in streets, and we do not see children being deprived of education in this country. But what is the situation of child abuse? Because that is something we hear, both physically, sexually. Child abuse exists in Maldives, the statistics have shown. So what is being done by the government to counter this?
It is a sad thing that while we are applauding the achievements that we have got in these areas, especially, for example, in the education sector, we have a primary universal education for both primary as well as secondary education. We have, by the government, we have a policy of that we do not leave any child behind from these processes as well. But it's unfortunate that this is undermined by the fact that the rights of the child, the well-being of the child are being abused. Sometimes they are being abused by their parents, sometimes by the family, by other people in authority, other family members, and strangers as well. So there was a law introduced in I believe 2009 to combat this, especially for child abuse cases. Later on, we have the new penal code, which has done the same. We have other laws like the Domestic Violence Act coming in to ensuring that protection are given to children and family and other vulnerable groups as well, to ensure that they are not abused, either physically, sexually, or mentally as well. But these are just pieces of legislation. We have to ensure that these laws are enforced properly. It is said that these incidents do occur from time to time, and we are unable to make the best use of our societal responsibility to ensure that these are diminished. We have seen that there is an increase of number of reports coming in, but perhaps that is because there has been more awareness of the laws of these situations. But at the same time, we would like all state institutions to ensure that they do their work in ensuring that the children are protected, as well as we would request all societies, the communities, also do their part. For example, it is sad and strange that, for example, a child is being abused in a house for a number of years, for a number of days, and the neighbor not knowing it, the neighbor not doing anything, a member of the family not doing it, even at least anonymously reporting the case to the relevant authorities. That is one area. The police are doing the protective area. The Family and Child Rights Division of the Ministry of Law and Gender, we are doing the counseling part, giving them the much needed psychological support, as well as the health sectors are giving them the health support as well. But additionally, in the instances where it is imperative that the child must be taken to the state care, we are doing that as well. But we have seen an increased number of children that we had to necessitate in taking to the state's care. And the Kudakuning here that we have in Willingili is now overcrowded. We have about 120 kids. But fortunately, with the help of a very generous donor, we have now just completed the new Kudakuning here in Holumale Island, and we have just started to shift some of the kids there. It would house children from 0 to 9 years in that Kudakuning here in Holumale, and it has a capacity of 120. So we hope that it would at least give us an opportunity to ensure that these children are taken better care of. Similarly, we are working on fostering system, a better enable system of fostering, as well as ensure that the fostering caretakers are made empowered, as well as they are monitored as well.
So what is being done to address the root cause? Often we see a vicious cycle of the mother being abused, and then the her children being abused, and then this is a vicious cycle. So what is being addressed to eliminate the root cause?
This is where the Domestic Violence Act and the gender-based violence programs are essential. We have to ensure that we do not have domestic violence, and when a victim of domestic violence is there, that we do give protection, and necessary protection to those victims of domestic violence, be it a mother, be it a sister, be it a daughter, or even another member of the family. Gender-based violence, it is both the sexes do get violated, but the numbers and the statistics show that it is women who get more oftenly intimidated or abused. So we have to ensure that these programs do work properly, that they are given protection, that those abusers do stop abusing the other gender or the other victims. For that, we have been the government, NGOs working in this area, other state institutions, and even individuals who have interest in this area are working so much on prevention. And I believe that prevention is the root solution to this, ensuring that us men, us boys, do stop abusing women.
So before wrapping up, I'd like to come back to the question of overthrowing the government, attempts to overthrow the government. So what will be the impact on the society when there's this sort of political unrest?
It is very sad that we have, in a very short period of time, seen that there have been attempts on the person of our President Jammeh. First, there was a blast in the presidential launch back in September last year, and now a feeble attempt using fake documents. But the problem here is that this again puts the country at an unrest, uncertainty within the systems, accusation on several people, and this is not good for the country. I believe we don't deserve, we as a country, we as a people don't deserve to be in this turmoil all the time. We deserve a better life. We deserve to ensure that we do enjoy the children, the youth, the elderly, do enjoy their life, carry on with their education, carry on with the development of the country, social harmony be there established. But unfortunately, focus are now being diverted to these areas: criminal investigations, prosecution, news on that, social media flooding on this. So psychologically, the impact to the society is so enormous. We as a people have to work together. Politicians, political different orientation, have to come and sit down and ensure that we do have a dialogue. We Maldivians, we can find our own solutions to these problems.
Thank you for joining us. That concludes tonight's show. Have a good evening.